everyone, it's Sandra, and I'm going to set Cinderella, my kitchen worm bin, up for a migration and eventual harvest today. It's been 3 weeks since I looked into this bin and thought I'd overfed it. So she's been on a diet. She's been on a diet for, 29 days. And because she's indoors and partly over a heat vent, she actually is sitting at about 21 degrees Celsius or about 70 plus degrees Fahrenheit. So these worms are going to be hungry. This is not like a winter worm bin that has slowed down. She's still going strong. So I expect these worms, because I put them on a diet last time, I expect them to have cleaned up their food. And it's a perfect time to do a migration harvest because I think I've got some hungry worms. So let's do a fluff of Cinderella. Make sure she cleaned up that overfeeding. I'll put a link to that video in the description. And if she's cleaned it up, she's going to get a feeding today and set her up for a harvest. So I'm just going to gently rake the top and get hopefully the chunkier bits to this end. Where's Prince Charming? Prince Charming is my feeding zone indicator. He should be in this end somewhere. Oh, here he is. This is what I put in the feeding zone. So let me just get these chunky bits. Yep. Road trip, cutlery. Cinderella gets atypical bedding. I can see the corner out of the takeout container sticking up there. I assume I'm going to be doing the migration zone at one end. I'll decide which in a minute. But I just want this stuff, because if I do decide to set up a migration zone, I want this chunky stuff all to go in it. And I think is that an avocado pit? Yes, it is. And it feels really light, which means the worms have already cleaned it out. You just have to eat the shell. Okay, so there's another plastic liner. Okay, let's take up that takeout container and see what's happened to that. I know the worms will eat the cardboard from it because I've fed these before to worms, and just leave a plastic liner. And it had food all through it. So yes, they're in the process of doing that. You can see they've licked up all that overfeeding, the residue that was left in here, and they're starting to just leave me the plastic liner. Okay, good. So I'll put that in my chunky end. You know, I can take out a lot of this bulk that I'm just putting to this end over here, and I can end up with a lovely harvest of this finer material. You can see that this end is a bit drier, and so this is perfect to leave this as the zone that is going to be pulled once I get all the worms over here. And of course the microbes are going to keep working on this material until it's done. So, but what I want to do is I just want to put a piece of material here so I don't undo what I've just done. This is where having that grocery bag will come into handy. I can just sit that right there and move these chunky bits right on top. As this pile gets bigger, I may still, drop some around the edges, which is fine. I've done this many times, and by and large, it works. Okay, now let's go in and see the feeding zone. And I will just stop here and just put a little insert of what that overfeeding looked like, just a little clip of that video right here.
3 weeks ago, I went into Cinderella to check on this meal in the box takeout container. It had been in the bin 8 days. And although the worms were all over the outside of the food, they had not penetrated that big chunky food. So I cleaned out a trench on the far side of the bin, put in a bit of dryer lint and some newspaper, added the chunky food and spread it out to thin out the chunks. before giving it a little bit more newspaper and some eggshell powder and burying it. Then I buried the takeout container in the other end. And that brings us back to today.
Okay, so now we know how much food the worms had to get through. Let's see what they did with it. You can see why I want to pull some of this material out. The worms have been busy, and there we go, there's the worms. There they are. They've been busy. And when they're congregated like that, they're obviously still on food. That is not a sign that they've totally finished their food from that overfeeding. There was probably a dense clump of the food left over. Normally, if worms have totally finished, they'll be a little bit more spread out than that. Although, I must say, this is also the end that has the most moisture. So the worms are going to stay in here just because of that reason alone. But yeah, there they are. You see in the clumps. But that's okay. That's okay that they're clumping there, because that's kind of where we're going to send them again. This big clump, what's that? That is not food, it's carbon. That's a piece of carbon, but with worms on it. And that's exactly what I'm going to do today to set up the migration. I've kind of created a bit of a mountain range in the middle. But what I'm going to do once I get this last corner up, come on, up, up, up. There we go. There we go. I'm just going to take this material and put it down here. This is the chunky end. This is the end that is going to stay in the bin. It's kind of represents the resident microbe population of the bin. So all the fungi and the bacteria of the bin are represented on all these sticks and avocado peels, and they are going to stay in this bin when I do the harvest after the migration. Just going to remove this brown paper bag. It's done its job for now. See that beautiful cocoon? That's from my Vancouver Island worms. Might as well leave it in the end that's going to be staying. So any chunky bits, I'll just leave there. Sorry for the wiggle. That's an Amazon string from a package. There. So this material, and I've spread the worms out, so that gives this material another look by the worms. They'll have to climb this way because this is where I'm going to be putting the food for today's feeding, that it represents the migration to get the worms out of this finished end. And then I can pull out this material that Cinderella is working on and reduce the depth of this bin considerably. All right, so this is going to be now the feeding zone. So I'm just going to push and make this chasm a little bit wider. Look at that, wider. There we go. Chunkiest bits on the bottom. Now some new carbon. I don't want long-term carbon, and actually last time I also gave Cinderella a newspaper, ripped up newspaper. So this time I'm giving her some ripped up road trip napkins. The feeding is some moldy pumpkin, complete with pulverized eggshell. Try to keep the juice away from the wall. There's all that eggshell. I'll wipe that up with a napkin. The worms will like that. There, wrapped up the rest of that eggshell grit. Move the pumpkin around. A little bit more new carbon on the top. I can even use that box. Look at that. And it's got that lovely plastic liner, which will shield that pumpkin from inquiring fungus gnats that might sniff it out. There we go. Just want to seal up that one corner. All right, so hungry worm migration here. Starve your worms a little bit if you want them to migrate, because they're going to be looking for that pumpkin now. And the next time we come into Cinderella, I hope we see a huge crowd in here and all the worms out of this area, but not before they crawl the length of it and work this end zone material one more time. So Prince Charming sits there to remind us where we fed. All right, everyone, thanks for watching me and Cinderella. Take care. Bye for now.